everyone, and welcome to Self-Determination SDP Connect with Disability Voices United. My name is Christiana Morales. I'm the director here of Self-Determination Program at DVU. Welcome. We have interpretation. So go to the bottom of your screen to the globe and select the globe and select your language, even if you speak English, because if we have something interpreted from a question or anything, you won't hear the interpretation. If you're on a cell phone, go to the bottom of the phone and you'll see 3 dots. Select those dots and you can select your interpretation there. We have a great presentation today and a great discussion, but before we get started, I wanted to do a quick announcement. I wanted to remind everybody about our conference that's coming up. And so it is coming up November 3rd. That is a Friday. It's from 8:30 to 4:30. It's virtual. And the theme of our conference is Our Future, Our Fight, Our Right to Self-Determination. We're really excited about it. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen and showing you how to register. And here is my screen. This is our main screen. Kira will put the link to our webpage in the chat in case you don't know how to get there. And this is on our main webpage. Scroll down just a little bit and you'll find the banner for Our Future, Our Fight, Our Right to Self-Determination. And if you click the Learn More, you will get all the information you could possibly want about our conference. If you are interested in becoming an exhibitor, we would love to have you come, and you can have a virtual table. There's opportunities for all the conference goers to come and visit your table. So it's a great chance to chat with everybody and discuss the things that are going on at the conference. The conference also, they're not inexpensive to host, and so we love to have sponsors. Sponsors really make it possible for us to do this. If you are interested in becoming a sponsor, we have lots of different levels that you can select from, and you would click that here as well. If you want to attend our conference, which we want all of you to do, this is where you would go and you would click the Register Now button here to get to the registration page. There's lots of information on this page to talk to you about everything from who the speakers are going to be and that it's going to be recorded and how you can pay for it and all of that. We do accept payment from your financial management service if you have it in your spending plan. We will accept payment if you are not in self-determination yet and you can get a conference through your regional center. We will accept payment through your regional center, and then we also accept private pay if you want to go ahead and pay for it yourself. If you have any problems with how to register, we have some helpful instructions that will step by step, by screen, how to get through the registration if you have any trouble. I want to also share what our agenda is going to be. We have the link for this, so you can take a look at it in our chat, but this is the beginning as we're going to start sharing all of the agenda and all of the people who are going to be speaking at it. And so take some time, scroll through, look and find all of the great breakout sessions. Now, you only can attend one breakout session live while you're there. There's 2 at the day of, so you can do 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. However, they're all recorded. So you can go back. So if there's ones you're like, oh, I really want to be in 2 different sessions, you can be in 6 different sessions if you want to go back and watch them later. And we will share all those videos with you after the conference so people can go back. So I'm going to stop sharing. Now, if you have registered and you are having any issues or you have any questions or you're not sure how to register, I'm going to introduce Monica to you right now, and she is the one who can help you with any registration, and she'll give you her contact and everything.
Thank you, Christiana. So I know folks have had some difficulty with different parts of the registration. So first of all, I want to thank you for registering and getting as far as you have. I will respond to everyone. Please feel free to email me your specific question to monica@dvunited.org, and I'll put that in the chat in a moment. I want to review 2 things that seem to be causing problems for registrants. So the first one involves an email confirmation from Huva that says your payment was marked as received, but your registration is not complete. So this pertains to people who registered through the regional center funding or through the FMS. So basically, we have pushed you through the registration system, but we still need you to take those next steps. And that may be contacting your service coordinator, obtaining the POS or the authorization, or that might mean contacting your FMS and finding out what they need. I have worked with FMSs annually, so I don't work with them all the time. And I'm finding that this year they're doing things a little differently. So please send me an email if there's something that you need to bill your FMS. Perhaps it's an invoice, whatever it is, get me in contact with that person and I will take those next steps. So that is a confusing message that some people have run into. And the second point that has become a stopping point for folks who are registering through regional center funding or FMS funding is after you've chosen your ticket type, you enter your attendee information, you go to the next page, and it's asking for a credit card payment. And so people say, wait a minute, my regional center or FMS is going to fund this. What is not obvious is that next to the credit card payment, there's a little arrow, and you click that arrow and you'll have an invoice option. So choose the invoice option. Just put your personal information in there. We're not going to send you an invoice. It just gives us someone to follow up with. But the invoice option will allow you to proceed, complete your registration, and then take those next steps with your FMS or regional center. So those are the two main hiccups that people have run into. And I'm happy to help you personally through email. And that's Monica at dvunited.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. So if you have any questions, Monica's your person to reach out to. She will get back to you, we promise. We're a little short-staffed without Ed, and so thank you. So thank you all for your patience. So I am so excited to introduce our next presenters. I'm going to introduce all of the presenters, and then what's going to happen is we're going to have a presentation in the beginning, and then we'll have some people join afterwards. So I want to start by introducing William Leiner. He is the managing attorney for Disability Rights California. Maria Irarte, senior attorney from Disability Rights California. Dustlyne Beaver, she's an independent facilitator from First Choice Solutions. And Tumboura Hill, who is the CEO of Quality Assured Training and Advocacy. Welcome. Thank you so much. So I'm going to hand it over to DRC first. They're going to do their presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for that introduction. And thank you for opening up this space to us for this training. I'm Will Leiner. I'm an attorney here with Disability Rights California, and I've spent my career here doing legal and policy advocacy on behalf of people served by California's regional centers. I'm also a sibling. I have a brother served by this very system. So like many people, I wear all the different hats, both personal and professional. And I'm going to pass things over to Maria so she can introduce herself to all of you too.
Thank you, Will. Thank you for inviting us to present here. I've been an attorney with Disability Rights California for over 20 years. Most of the time I worked in the benefits arena, but currently I am part of what is called the Fair Hearing Unit project, where the focus is to represent more people at hearings. And the focus is also on the monolingual Spanish community. So that's me.
So let's go over our learning objectives for today. we're going to talk about 4731 complaints, or more plainly, a type of complaint that you can file with your regional center if you believe that your regional center or a service provider has violated your rights. We're going to talk about who can file these complaints and for what reasons, how this process is different from what we call the appeals process, and what types of issues are better suited for which of these legal processes. We're also going to talk about what you can expect after you file a 4731 complaint, and we hope to give you some advocacy tips and tricks along the way. So you might be wondering, why does this complaint have such a funny name? What does the numbers 4731 have to do with anything? Well, it's named after the section of the law in the Welfare and Institutions Code where this complaints process is located. It's the section of the law that you see in front of you, and I'm going to read it out loud for the interpreters. Each consumer or any representative acting on behalf of any consumer or consumers who believes that any right to which a consumer is entitled has been abused, punitively withheld, or improperly or unreasonably denied by a regional center, state-operated facility, or service provider may pursue a complaint as provided in this section. This is a 52-word sentence. I looked it up. My words to minute calculator says that when spoken out loud and read at an average speed, it takes about half a minute, 30 seconds to read this sentence. The legislature really knows how to cram a lot of information into one sentence. So let's break things down. So the language starts with who can file a 4731 complaint. So you'll see that it's a consumer or representative acting on their behalf. And consumer means someone who is receiving regional center services. So we've seen cases, for example, where someone that's caught up in the intake and eligibility process at the very beginning, the front door of the regional centers might say, no, those people can't utilize this complaint process because they're not yet regional center consumers. And also note that a representative can act on behalf of more than one consumer. So this means that people can file joint complaints if there's a common legal violation that impacts multiple people at once. Now let's quickly talk about the grounds for filing a complaint. So a complaint can be filed when a consumer or their representative believes that any right to which a consumer is entitled has been abused, punitively withheld, or improperly or unreasonably denied. And we're going to get more into that in a few slides. So against whom? So the complaint can be filed against one of three entities. It can be a regional center, a state-operated facility, or a service provider. I think you all have a good sense of who regional centers are and who service providers are. State-operated facilities, that's a bit more uncommon. Those are a small handful of residential facilities that are owned and operated by the Department of Developmental Services. There's only a small number of them. You'll know if you reside in one of these settings, but they go by the names of Porterville Developmental Center, Canyon Springs Community Facility, Northern Star, Southern Star, and Central Star. So again, those are the three entities against whom a complaint can be filed: a regional center, a state-operated facility, or a service provider. I see a quick question. I'll answer it right away. Are service providers defined as a vendor with a regional center? Yes, vendors of regional centers are service providers. Thank you for asking that clarifying question, Deborah. I want to focus on the about what a complaint can be filed. In other words, the grounds for a complaint. And I don't know about all of you, but I find these standards to be pretty confusing. They're not defined anywhere in the law, and the law doesn't really give any examples either. So let's break this down together. There are 4 grounds about which a complaint can be filed. Again, they're when a right has been abused, punitively withheld, improperly denied, or unreasonably denied. These are typically lumped together as rights violations, but each of these things has a different meaning. And I want to work through some of those meanings. And let's start with abused. When a right is abused, that usually means that somebody has deliberately violated your rights. An extreme example might be when a provider purposely locks someone in their room or puts them in a type of restraint where they're being held down, face down to the ground, knowing that this type, we call it seclusion, we call it prone restraints. Those are illegal, and people have a right to be free of this type of restraint. The next ground is punitively withheld. So here we're talking about a deliberate denial of a legal right as a form of retaliation or punishment. So an example of this might be if you complain about a regional center and they respond by cutting your services to get back at you. I've been in a lot of these meetings, and I've heard a lot of stories of retaliation. It happens. I'll also just say that it can be really, really difficult to prove. Being able to prove up a complaint for retaliation is hard. The next 2 categories, rights that are improperly or unreasonably denied. These are situations where rights are denied without a valid or logical or reasonable basis. This is probably where the majority of rights violations fall. So for example, a regional center might say that they can't translate your IPP document into your preferred language because they can't find a vendor for translation services. And people have a right to translate an IPP. Or maybe a regional center doesn't respond to your request for an IPP meeting. People have a right to an IPP meeting within 30 days or 7 days if there's a health or safety risk. Or maybe a regional center denies a service, and they're allowed to deny services, but they refuse to consider any information from you about why the service is needed. So these are all examples of what I would call rights that are unreasonably or improperly denied. But I have one more point that I also want to make here. Don't worry all that much about identifying one of these 4 categories when you file complaints, and we'll get more into the process of filing these complaints later. So don't stress out about, oh, was this right improperly denied or unreasonably denied? I can't figure out what the difference is. It's going to be much more important to be able to identify the legal right that was violated than it is to identify which of these specific or particular 4 grounds the violation falls under.
Will, it's Maria. So as a consumer, where can I find information about my rights?
Maria, that's a really good question. And I just moved on to the next slide, and we're going to cover some of that information. So this gets to the scope of the complaint. And you'll see that the complaint process applies to any right to which a consumer is entitled. And this typically means complaints that are based on legal violations of your rights under the Lanterman Act or Title 17 regulations. And Title 17 regulations, those are the rules that TDS comes up with to implement the Lanterman Act, the state law that governs our IDD service delivery system. We're not going to be able to go over all the rights that can be violated. There are just too many. But I did include a few links about where you can find information about your legal rights. The first link is a link to our Disability Rights California's Rights Under the Nantucket Act manual. And the second link is a DDS publication that they put out called A Consumer's Guide to the Nantucket Act. The other point that I want to make is that this process isn't just for or about violations of the Nantucket Act or the DDS Title 17 regulations. Again, the complaint process applies to any right to which a consumer is entitled. And the Nantucket Act in section 4502, and I have this language in the slide in front of you, is clear that people with developmental disabilities have all the same legal rights and responsibilities guaranteed to all other individuals by the United States Constitution and the laws in the Constitution of the state of California. So people sometimes look at this section and they say, wow, so can I file a 4731 complaint for things like discrimination? And my response is typically this. The law gives you the right to file a 4731 complaint about discrimination against a regional center or a service provider. But that doesn't mean that the 4731 complaint process is your only option, and it probably shouldn't be your only option. And I say this because I don't necessarily trust that regional centers or DDS necessarily know how to review a discrimination case. And even if they did, it's unlikely that they would offer, in my view, a meaningful resolution. And there are other outside agencies whose job it is to handle discrimination complaints. For example, there is an agency called the California Civil Rights Department, and they are charged with enforcing California's civil rights laws, including discrimination involving state-funded programs. And I would suggest that regional centers are state-funded programs. They receive all their money from the state of California. And I'm going to just drop a link in the chat with information about the California Civil Rights Department. And we might come back another time to talk more about that complaint process. But again, my point is that just because you can file a 4731 complaint about any legal violation by a regional center or a service provider, including complaints about discrimination, that doesn't mean that the 4731 complaint process is your only remedy, because there are other agencies with other complaint processes that might apply to those situations. And I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Maria.
Thank you, Will. So 4731 also limits the scope of the complaint. And in front of you, we have section E of the code, and it says that the complaints will not be used to resolve disputes concerning the nature, scope, or amount of services and supports that should be included in an IPP. Next slide. So here's a side-by-side comparison of issues that would be under a 4731 complaint versus issues that would be for the appeals process. So I'm going to ask for some volunteers to answer some of the questions I'm going to have for you guys. So under 4731, we have an example of an issue that involves the regional center not providing a copy of your IPP. Why is this an issue for a 4731 complaint? Anyone? I can't see the chat, so if there's an answer in the chat, could someone read it?
I don't see an answer in the chat, but I'm going to take a stab at it. which is because it's your right to get a copy of your IPP, and
That's
they
right.
violated your right.
Exactly. So let's go on to the next one. What if the regional center denies access to your records?
I would say the same thing.
Same
Right.
thing, right? You have the right to have access to your records, and the regional center's denying it. What about the regional center refusing to provide your IPP in your language?
Same thing, that you have the right to. Now, does that also apply to having interpreter at your IPP meeting?
You have the right to have an interpreter at your IPP meeting. I think the issue there is the quality of the interpretation, but yes.
So if they say we don't have anybody, then you could file a 4731.
You could, and you would want to probably you'd want to continue the IPP. What about your residential provider telling you that you have to leave the house during a certain time of the day?
Ooh, that's a good one. And I've heard that one before.
Well, if you're in a group home, you can stay in your group home all day if you want. You can leave at any time. So your rights are being violated when the provider's telling you that you've got to leave. You've got the right to stay in your home. And what about the regional center not following the timelines that are in the Lanterman Act?
That one I see a lot, right? The requesting an IPP. Now, here's the question. When would that request start counting? Do you need to make the request in writing? Like if you just asked and they didn't set the date, would you be able to file a 4731? Or do you have to show them that you in writing asked and they didn't do it?
If for example, I asked for an IPP meeting today and 40 days have gone by and I still don't have my IPP meeting, but I had asked for it, I could still file a 4731 complaint and say, I asked for it on this day. All I get is a response from the regional center saying, we're working on it. But in my mind, best practice would be for you to do it in writing, ask for that IPP meeting in writing, do everything in writing, because that way you have a paper trail. So on the opposite end, when we're talking about an appeal, remember, it's about the nature, scope, amount of services. So if the regional center is denying eligibility, if the regional center is wanting to terminate your eligibility, if you disagree on the amount of services that the regional center is offering or the type of support is offering, if you requested a service and it's been denied, or if the service is going to be reduced, those are all issues for an appeal. So it's really important to know the difference between a complaint and an appeals process, because what could happen is, what if the issue is an issue for appeal, but you end up filing a 4731 complaint and you only had 30 days to get aid paid pending? Let's say it's a ongoing service, and 60 days to appeal, and you've counted on this 4731 complaint getting you what you need, and that was not the right thing to do. And your timelines have gotten by, and you might think to yourself, well, wait a minute, you're going to get a notice, and the notice is going to tell you, that you have these appeal rights. But I can tell you, because I've spoken to a lot of people, and I asked them, well, did you appeal? And they say, well, no, I don't know how. But they have the notice. It's just that they don't read the notice to know what their next steps are. So it can happen. And that's why it's important. One of the reasons why it's important to know the difference between a 4731 complaint and the appeals process.
We actually had a good question. which Ada asked at 4:56, when do we use notice of action versus 4731? So I think it might not be clear what the difference between those two are.
Okay, so when the regional center has, in the right side of this presentation, you have a column that talks about the issues that would be issues for an appeal. So when you disagree about the amount of services that are being offered, the type of support that's being offered, you requested a service that's been denied, a service you have has been reduced, or the regional center's telling you, we're going to terminate your eligibility, seen that, or you're not eligible for regional center services. Those are issues for an appeal. And what should happen is that when any of these things happen, the regional center by law has to give you what is called a notice of action. I think there's another name for it that escapes me at this moment. And that notice will advise you of what the decision is, why, cite to the law, and also important, if you're not happy with the notice of action, your appeal rights. So that's the notice of action. A complaint is a different thing. You're not, with a complaint, you're not going to, you're not going to be in front of an administrative law judge to hear the issue. I hope I've described it. I don't know, Will, if you want to add to it.
I think it's good to know that a notice of action is coming from the regional center to you, and a complaint is coming from you to the
right.
You're complaining about the regional center or their vendor or that. So you're instigating the second part. The other one I hear a lot is, can they cancel this service without giving a notice of action by just telling you, we're going to discontinue this service? And if they don't give you a notice of action, can you still file an appeal? And people might not know that when we say appeal, we're talking about fair hearing. So that's the term we hear a lot. So can you file a fair hearing if they don't give you a notice of action?
Yes, you can. You don't have to wait. Like if they tell you over the phone, we're going to terminate your service, and you don't get a notice of action, yes, you can file for a hearing. But the law says that they have to give you a notice. But I've seen situations where the regional center just tells the parent or the consumer, and there's no notice of action. And I speak to the parent or the consumer, and they've been waiting for months for this notice of action to arrive. And I'm like, no, you need to file for a fair hearing yesterday. You don't need to wait for that notice. And I would, as part of the appeal, I would also include that my due process rights were violated because I didn't get a notice about the termination of this service.
And Maria, I'll add one more thing to that scenario, which is that in some cases, you can do both processes at once. So like Maria said, you can file a fair hearing because your service is being reduced. They give you a notice of action, and you want a judge to hear that, hearing officer to hear that case. You want to keep your services. But that hearing officer is only going to look at the facts of your case and hopefully decide that you can keep your services. The hearing officer isn't going to tell the regional center that they have to fix for everybody how they send notices of action. So on that issue, you could also file a 4731 complaint that says that the regional center's practices around sending notices of action violate your rights because they didn't send one, and you can ask for an investigation to see if they're doing that to other people too. So we'll go through the process in a few slides, but that could be a way to fix an issue where they'll stop that from happening again to you, but to other people as well through the 4731 complaint process.
That's an excellent point. So yeah, that's a situation where you could do both. Okay, next slide. Okay, so guess what? There's a fillable form that you can get from the DDS website, and we have the link there. And you see, it's a very simple form. This is a 4731 complaint form, and you put in your information and the regional center involved. And then they say they want three things: a statement of facts about what happened, what's the violation that you allege, who's responsible. Are we talking about the provider, the regional center, the state facility, and the proposed solution to the problem? What is it that you want? What is the outcome that you want from the 4731 complaint? Next slide. But guess what? You don't have to use the form if you don't want to. You can write your own 4731 complaint. And we have a manual called the Rights Under the Lanterman Act manual that's on our website. And this is a sample complaint that you can find in that manual. And you send it to the director of the regional center, and you're stating that this is, I'm filing a 4731 complaint, who you are, who you're having the problem with, what is the problem, and at the end, what is it that you want? What's the resolution that you want? So you don't have to use the form that's on the DDS website. You can, create your own form, but make sure that you have all the information that they need. Next slide. Okay, proposed resolutions, what could they be? Fix it for me right away and make sure it doesn't happen again. Well, how do we do that? Maybe asking that the staff be trained, modifying the policies, maybe monitoring from DDS. What about compensatory services or reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses? Although there's no affirmative right in the Lanterman Act for these things, there is also nothing that precludes you from asking for these things. So, if it's a situation where you feel that you should be reimbursed for out-of-pocket expenses or compensatory services, meaning that there are services that you should have gotten, you didn't get, and you now want compensation, you want the services, you want the compensatory services to make up for what you didn't get, ask for it. I don't know if any of you out there have had luck in requesting compensatory services or reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses through a 4731 complaint. If you have, let us know. I'd love to hear from you here in this presentation about that.
And Maria, I have one more thing to add. I put uncommon remedy next to compensatory services and reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses, again, because our experience is that people ask for these things, but it's really difficult to get the regional center to agree to them, and we'll go over the steps in the appeal process, the steps in the complaint process. There's a process where then you can send it to DDS, and it's hard to get that out of them too. So like Maria said, you can ask for these things, and you should if you feel like you're entitled to them. But our experience is that regional centers and DDS, they don't often give people that type of remedy.
In the case where you filed a 4731 complaint, and let's say that you've asked for reimbursement of out-of-pocket expenses and it's denied, what is your remedy there? Is there anything to do?
Are you asking?
I'm asking Will if he knows.
I'm like, do you want to volunteer?
I apologize, Maria. I was going through some of the chat questions. So I missed the question.
I mean, where is the end of the road for these denials of reimbursement or compensatory services through a 4731 complaint? It's the end of the road, DDS saying no.
Yeah.
I'll say the only time I've got compensatory with the 4731 was from the regional center in the first part of the complaint agreeing to it. I've never had DDS enforce one. So if they kind of don't agree there, I would say that has been the end of the road for us.
Yeah.
But it doesn't hurt to ask. I'm not saying you shouldn't.
You should ask. You might be surprised, you know, who knows?
And I can speak from experience as well. We've had both outcomes where we were able to get compensatory services through the 4731 complaint, or we were given the official no, and then we were able to receive that through the fair hearing process. So I've seen it work both ways.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, next slide. Okay, how do we do this? So what you're going to do is you're going to file that complaint and you're going to send it to the regional center executive director. The regional center will have 20 working days from receiving the complaint to investigate your complaint and give you a written response. You get the response. You don't like the response. Well, what do you do then? Then you can file a complaint with the DDS director. You've got within 15 days of getting the response to do that. And then the director has 45 days from receiving your complaint to give you a written decision, and it's going to be final. That's it. Those are the steps to filing a 4731 complaint. Next slide. Okay, a tip. When you file your 4731 complaint, include all supporting documentation that proves your allegations. Because the law doesn't say how the regional centers and DDS have to conduct the investigation or what standards they must use. Some regional centers will reach out to you to gather information about your 4731 complaints. Others will not, and they're just going to issue a decision based on what you've submitted. Historically, DDS's practice has been not to talk to the person who filed the complaint, but we've heard that this may be changing and that DDS may be more willing to hear from people who appeal a regional center's response. So we're curious to know from you if any of you want to share your experience going through a 4731 complaint process. Is there someone who wants to talk about something, a complaint that they filed and how, and maybe some hiccups along the way and how you resolved those hiccups?
Oh, Christiana, you're on mute.
It's one of those days, I'm telling you.
Okay.
We filed a 4731 and the regional center investigated. We agreed with what their plan was to do. So we didn't file an appeal, but then they never followed through and did it. So
what did you do?
We sent it to DDS beyond the 15 days. And they said, you're beyond the 15 days.
And that was the end of the road for that one?
Mm-hmm. We had to refile. But my question was, if you believe that they're going to do it in good faith, would we have to refile a new one, or should DDS have accepted, like, well, you're beyond it, but you thought they were going to do what they said they were going to do?
That's a good question. I mean, DDS is already telling you they're not even going to look at it. So what options do you have, right? The only other option would be like what you did, which was to refile. Thinking that at the moment that the regional center said, okay, we agree, we're going to do this, was it possible for you in hindsight to have given them like a time frame to implement or to do what it is that they agreed to do that was still within the 15 days that would allow you to appeal to DDS? Was that a possibility in your case?
It was longer, it was training and those kind of things. So it would be difficult to
Right.
do that. But I know that Disability Rights California had advocated for fair hearing to extend the time for appeals. Is it something on your radar to extend the time for appeals for 4731s as well?
Will, do you remember? I don't, I'm not, I'm fuzzy on that one.
Yeah, well, I know that. I think you're referring, Christiana, to the appeals process where it used to be 30 days to file an appeal. Now it's 60 days. I'll say personally speaking, I think that, 4731, this complaint process is also ripe for reform in the same way that the regional center fair hearing process was also reformed. And I think the example you gave of GDS saying, oh, you're past the timeline, so I guess you need to start over. And if you want to file a complaint against the regional center for not implementing their resolution, well, that's where you need to start. That, you asked what should be done. And I might personally say, I think TDS should have heard that complaint.
Yeah.
TDS is the one that's in charge of their own process. So realistically, for most people, what happens is what TDS says will happen, because there's not a good remedy, unless you want to take them to court, like Superior Court, to try to get them to do something differently. So that's just a long way of saying, like, I think there's a lot of room for reform, and I'll give a comparison. As part of the fair hearing reform, we learned and we know that even when people got a good decision from a hearing officer, sometimes regional centers wouldn't implement those decisions. They either were unwilling to do it or unable to do it. So there's now a new process that says you can go straight to DDS to say, the regional center isn't doing what the judge ordered them to do. Please help, please intervene. And I'd like to think that here, there's not, but there should be a way to go straight to DDS if a regional center said they were going to do something as a resolution in a 4731, and they just didn't. Why should you have to start that whole timeline over again? So that's one small example, but I would suggest I do think that 4731 is it's due for an overhaul in the same way that the hearing process was. But part of this is that we would love to hear more about experiences of people that have gone through this process. Christiana, you shared your experience. I may personally think like this law needs to be overhauled, but I really would love to hear, like, have people gone through this process? Has it worked generally well? Are people having a difficult time accessing this process? Is it unfair in different ways? Those are also the types of things that we would love to hear about if people are willing to share either in the chat or through sharing their stories with the raised hand function.
So I have one posted anonymously, and they said, in SDP, a client asked for an exception so the funds can be used out of state. And the client knows this is an exception that needs to be approved by the executive director. The service coordinator and team kept saying it was in review for over 3 months. The client asked for the notice of action to appeal. 2 people acknowledged the request, but the notice of action was never issued. 3 weeks later, a 4731 was issued, and it's been 3 more weeks and still nothing. That the ombudsperson was CC'd on the email, and they've reached out to schedule an intake. So what is their next step? What should they do if the regional center doesn't acknowledge the 4731? Can you go directly to DDS then?
Go directly to DDS.
That's what I would advise people to do as well. But, will DDS accept that? Will they accept that complaint? Maybe, maybe not. That's where, there's a lot of unknowns about the process, because the process is whatever DDS wants it to be, right? So I would like to think they would accept it because it sounds like the right thing to do. And I think it's worth trying. And then, see what happens. If they say no, we're not going to accept it because the regional center didn't issue its decision, then we're kind of back to square one. But I would, it it cannot hurt to ask and see what DDS does. And I think these types of stories that we're talking about will help to inform, whether like this complaint process needs the same type of reforms as the fair hearing process when these types of stories are unearthed, where there doesn't seem to be a fair shot at a resolution to begin with.
Do
I
you
know,
have
Will.
any more slides? Because we do have some hands raised. So
We do
um,
have more slides. Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Let's move on. Really good discussion. And anyway, so other tips for a 4731 complaint: know the law or regulation that was violated, and Will went through some resources for that. If you ever have any questions about whether your rights have been violated, you can call us, and we can help with that. Be specific, use facts or examples on to show how the law or regulation was violated. Use clear language. You don't have to write like an attorney. Just simple language is fine. Document everything. If you have supporting documentation included with your 4731 complaint, timelines are always really helpful and important. From the beginning, I requested an IPP on November 1st, and the next, then I received an email from the service coordinator December 2nd saying they're working on it, and so forth. And, just as the time progresses, stay focused. We know that emotions are running high, but, keep to the facts and to what the law and what you want. And then propose solutions. What is it that you want? That's really important. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Will.
Yeah, I'll start with this next slide. It's just, kind of a recap of some of the things that we talked about, and like a little quiz. And you can pitch your answers in the chat. You can say it out loud. But it's really a question for all of you. In these scenarios, would it be more appropriate to a 4731 complaint or an appeal to go through the fair hearing process? So the first bullet is the regional center fails to provide a service that's in your IPP. Should that be a 4731 complaint or an appeal?
so I saw one pop up in chat. Does anybody else want to put your comments in chat? Let's see what okay, now we have one 4731 and one appeal.
Good. Good. I would say this is likely a 4731 complaint, right? Once a service is identified in someone's IPP, that means that the regional center has agreed you need it. So the regional center then has an obligation to fund that service. They don't really have a choice at that point. They shouldn't have a choice. So that's the type of thing that I know from experience, the regional center should, figure out how to get the person that service. And when the complaint, or if the complaint goes to DDS, I see them act on those types of complaints. It's really important that our system is able to get people the services that are identified in their IPPs. Next example, you want 40 hours of respite per month and the regional center is only offering 20. Would that be better for a fair hearing appeal for 4731? I'm seeing some comments.
Oh, lots of appeal. People know that one.
Yep.
So I hate to interrupt you, but I did want to make sure we get to Dustlyne and Tumboura. Is it okay if we get to them so they can kind of talk about how they have used these with self-determination?
Yes, please. You're all going to have the real life examples, not the made up hypothetical examples that were given. So please, those are the rest of our slides. We didn't have anything else that was substantive. So I am looking as forward to hearing what y'all have to say, as I think everyone on this call, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much. So we have a place where you can either raise your hand to ask a question, or you can put your question in the chat and we will alternate between the two. But first, we're going to have Dustlyne tell a little bit about how you have used 4731s.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'm going to share screen just so that way I can follow along. I promise it won't be death by PowerPoint. So for me in self-determination, 4731 complaints became a tool that I started to use regularly when helping families or participants transition into self-determination. A big part of it is just knowing when to use it. So what I want to do is give a disclaimer. We had excellent legal recommendations, and they gave very clear outlines about that. What I'm going to talk about are tips and ways that we can use the 4731 complaint in, like what they were saying, in the real world, where we're trying to get self-determination rolling for us, but we're finding we're having some trouble doing that. So what I find when I'm helping folks with self-determination is we typically file 4731 complaints specifically about the regional center and their lack of responsiveness. That has been the majority of the complaints we filed. Very rarely do we ever utilize them in self-determination for the service providers. I will put one little caveat, possibly FMSs, but that's a whole nother topic. So one of the things that we try to do before we have to use a 4731 complaint is we try a variety of things. So some tips are to make your meeting requests and service requests in writing. If you can, email's great. It helps you timestamp it, and it provides documentation on responses. So it gives you a record to work with. The other thing is when you start those email processes and you're following the timelines, mark it in your calendar. Count those working days and mark it in your calendar when you expect to have a response back from the regional center. That's really helpful in self-determination because it's easy to get lost in the process when time goes by and you're waiting to hear back. Something else that's really helpful is to focus on who else can help us. Maybe there's somebody else we can bring into the picture now before we get to 4731 complaint who might make it easier for all of us. The ombudsperson is a great resource. We did experience a situation where the family had filed a 4731 complaint before the ombudsperson was contacted. We were told by the office that they wouldn't get involved now that a 4731 complaint had been filed. So I highly recommend, if you're thinking of including the ombudsperson, to send them an email sooner rather than later. Don't wait until you've filed. Ask for their help and see if they can help you ahead of time. One of the other things you can do is you can get some clarifying questions answered with your Office of Clients' Rights. You can also go to your local self-determination advisory committee meetings and express your frustration with the self-determination process with your regional center. But at the end of the day, if your requests or your concerns are not addressed by the regional center, in the time frame that the law allows, the 4731 complaint process can be a really helpful tool. So some examples of when you would use it would be if you can't get your IPP meeting within 30 days of your request. That's really common in self-determination. It seems that when we ask for a budget meeting or a review of the person-centered plan to identify unmet needs or changes in circumstance, the regional centers aren't seeing that as an IPP meeting. And so we often have to remind them, hey, this is actually an IPP meeting, and we need to have this meeting within a certain time frame. The other thing is if your requests for support are ignored after all of your attempts, you don't get a response back, it's radio silence. Another one is if you can't get a decision in the time that the law allows, you can't get a budget in a reasonable time. Another big one we're seeing where 4731 complaints are increasing on our end is if services lapse, or if the extensions for your budget aren't put in place in time, that the FMSs are not continuing to pay for services and supports that you had set up. So we're using the 4731 complaint to help the regional centers identify that their regional center is not complying with maintaining services and preventing the lapse in service. So that's a big one. Another one can be if they're stopping services or discontinuing services and they didn't give you the proper notice. So they were talking about examples. I'm going to give you a few. A big one is if you get radio silence with your budget meeting request. Oftentimes what we try to do is give a friendly reminder, hey, this budget meeting is really an IPP meeting request. We do have timelines we have to meet, so please respond back. What we found oftentimes, the lack of response is often due to the turnover at the regional center. So they're losing staff, they're not replacing staff fast enough, and you don't know who you need to contact. Sometimes the 4731 complaint can be really helpful in solving the problem if nobody at the regional center can connect you with somebody to help you with your IPP meeting. Another one is if you share your unmet need at an IPP meeting and you have some ideas of how the regional center can meet your needs, and you're really clear about the services you're looking for, and you ask for those services, and the regional center doesn't get back to you. And if you finally get somebody to respond to you, they say, well, we just need more time to figure this out, or we need more time to see how to work in self-determination. That's not an answer. They're not telling you, yes, we agree with this, or no, we don't. And so we'll use the 4731 complaint to help speed that up and encourage them to follow with the timelines so we don't get that denial by delay. The outcomes we get typically in the self-determination process have been positive for us, especially if you follow the tips and tricks that the presenters before me provided. You can actually get some good outcomes. A lot of times it encourages the regional center to be more responsive and to communicate clearly. It encourages them to get you connected with staff that can actually help you move through the process. It can help speed up your getting your budget. So if the regional center is taking a really long time, the 4731 complaint is a good route to go if you feel like they're not meeting those timelines that the IPP expectations set. The other thing too is oftentimes we use the 4731 complaint to help us get unstuck. So if we feel like we're given incorrect information, confusing information, conflicting information, and that no decisions are being made, that if we're getting that denial by delay, the 4731 complaint often brings that to the administration, the higher leadership at the regional center. It brings it to their attention and they're able to attempt to troubleshoot and resolve it. So overall, we've had really good success using the 4731 complaint process. Prior to this, prior to self-determination, we didn't use the 4731 complaints as frequently, but I think that this particular tool is helping everybody understand the rights that the client has. don't change just because you're moving over to self-determination, that you still maintain those rights, and you have just the same amount of rights to get the help that you need in the time frame that you need it, and that the law allows you to receive that.
That was amazing, Dustlyne. Thank you so much. And I actually have found a similar thing, that sometimes by filing the 4731, you get some of the higher ups involved to get things moving. So I found the same thing. Tumboura, do you have things that you would like to share with us about your experience with 4731s and self-determination?
Yeah, hello everybody. I would have to say, number one, I love the 4731 complaint process. Right now, the regional center that I work with specifically, they're on 3 different plans of corrections because of the 4731 complaint process. It is the absolute best process for an individual to use in order to address whatever issues you're having, because it's not something that requires a lawyer. All it really matters is what you experience, if you felt your rights were violated or not, and you're just reporting it to the regional center. What they have to do is determine if your rights were violated. So the first thing I would suggest to anybody, get out a copy of the Leiner Act. It's on the internet. It's 384 pages. Look up code, the statute 4502. Look up your rights. Know your rights, because what they did was they wrote this in so you could defend yourself. You don't have to look around. You don't have to, I put my name in there, my email's in there, my website's in there. I'll help you write it. Because my whole thing is this is Disability Voices United. Everybody should have a voice. Nobody should speak and not be heard if they feel like something's happening with them. I worked for the regional center system for 13 years. It used to be my job to respond to 4731 complaints. It was my job to conduct investigations in homes and residential care and day programs. And I saw a lot of bad things. So when people say things are happening, I tend to listen to them and not push them away. If it's something that they can fix, that's your regional center's job. They have to give you every IPP meeting, they have to give you a copy of this information that you can file a 4731 complaint every IPP meeting. And the thing about a 4731 complaint is at the end of the year, they have to compile all the 4731 complaints that they got statewide, and they have to put that data in. And that's what helps them help the community at large, because now they know what's going on. We got a complaint for this IPP is taking too long. I saw where someone said that they had to sign that they attended an IPP. I have a plan of correction right now for that, because you're only supposed to sign for services that you receive. You don't sign for just sitting there and you sign in a blank check or open contract. So this is a 4731 complaint process. I'm sitting in. I love Disability Voices United. I like that they're giving everybody a voice. I like that they're bringing us all together, and this is my style. So I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody, but I'm a very aggressive advocate, and that's just who I am. I don't charge anything. My email's in there, my website's in there, and I just want to work with you to help you. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not giving legal advice, but you don't have to be a lawyer to do a 4731 complaint. You look up statute 4502. If any of those rights got violated, 4502.1, that comes after that, file a 4731 complaint. All they can do is tell you, hey, it doesn't meet the requirement. Hey, this is something that we don't address through this process. And then you just move forward. But at least you put it down so the next person that comes along, if they experience the same exact thing, like Will said, they have a record of it, and they can start trying to figure out, even in their own system, hey, this has occurred 30 times this month. And when they have their meetings and they say, why does this continue to occur? Okay, well, how do we fix our system? But the thing is, you cannot be silent. Stand up for yourself, speak for yourself. That's what this process is for. The legislators, they already got it right. California is an entitlement state. They already got it right. They wrote it into the law. We have a law. We have the Leiner Act. And all you have to do is look at it. You don't have to, it's online. You can download it for free. And only advice I would give is look up statute 4502 so you'll know your rights. There's a Bill of Rights. Just like in America, we're all Americans. We have a Bill of Rights. There's a Bill of Rights in there. Look it up. See if any of your rights are violated. If they are, DDS had on their website, they have the process for the 4731 complaint, how to fill it out, when to fill it out. And you saw the little slide there, but they give you all the information that you need. They give you everything you need. The only thing is you have to put it in motion. You have to let people know, and you have to, if you don't know how to do it, I'm offering my service in this. I'm not charging anything. It's just, if somebody needs help, I don't mind helping. And it's right there. And if it's not something that they have to enforce or give you, then at least you'll know. You won't have to walk away wondering, well, should I have asked about that? So that's that's my time, like the comedians say. And thank you all so much for having me here. Like I said, I love this. They've never had anything like this before. And I truly appreciate this program because it's getting the voice out. And that's what we need more of.
Oh, Tumboura, thank you so much. And there were a couple things you hit on that I think are so important. And one is, if we don't file these complaints and if we just sit around and complain, nothing's going to ever be fixed. So I'm saying, don't just do it for yourself, do it for the community. And one of the beautiful things about 4731 is you can file it for not only your behalf, but everybody else who's having the same problem. So I think it can be a powerful thing, and the numbers will matter. And having lots of them, they're seeing lots of complaints on the same things with self-determination, it's gonna get their attention. So this is why we really believe 4731s are important. Now, we don't have a lot of time for questions. I want to make sure that we get to our community. So please do raise your hand. I saw hands raised earlier. Please raise your hand. And there are questions in the chat. So I'm going to read off a question from the chat, and then I will go to the community. Cecilia asked at 5:17 p.m. in the 4731 complaint I've submitted to DDS, I have been they've called to ask me about the details of the complaint, but they never called again. And I didn't receive a written resolution. In my experience and opinion, I feel like they ignored the complaint. This is why the regional centers are so undisturbed, because there's no sanctions against them.
Did the 45 days go by and still no resolution? Because the DDS does have a longer period to respond to it.
Is that 45 working days or calendar days? I always have to look it up, but I never remember.
It's 15 working days for the regional. Yeah, let's go. Will is going to look it up.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's working days, calendar days, confusing.
I'm glad it's not just me.
Important to know, because you could.
It is.
Yeah.
And as Dustlyne said, know it and mark it on your calendar so you're keeping track of that. Vladimitra, you can unmute yourself.
All right, thank you. My question is for, I don't know if Monica is still here, the lady that talked about the process of the payment for the conference. Because is she still here?
I don't believe she's still here, but I will
Okay.
put her email in the chat again so you can reach out to her directly.
Well, let me just ask you a question, because on my spending plan, I have a line that's for conferences, and it says for client/family member. So when I tried to register, of course, I got stuck because I saw they wanted the payment from me. But when I called my coordinator, she said that it was a mistake what I have on my spending plan. It should have been another code, or I'm supposed to register separately from my daughter so that they only pay for my daughter and they don't pay for me. And I said, but my spending plan was approved and it says for client and family member. And so she's like, oh, no, no, that was a mistake that I let it get by. So I'm like a little confused. I told her I have to check into that because that just doesn't sound right to me.
That is something Monica can help you on our end.
Okay.
And then feel free to email me and I can talk to you a little bit about we'll put my the info for
Okay.
self-determination email in there and I will get
Okay.
and I can I think give you a little bit more specific.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Lisa Walker.
So I did file 4731 and it went to the state, then state wrote letter to regional center, then regional center lawyer replied. Is that correct? I mean, I'm not sure if all other regional center does the same thing, but my regional center, I received a letter from lawyer. It's very intimidating because I did not know the jargon of the legal terminology, basically saying that there's no violation. So then I was stuck. So then I did not know what to do, so that I believed them because the lawyer says that no, there was no violation. So that was the end of 4731. So what I want to know is that when 4731 is filed and then DDS contact regional center, is it a norm that the legal counsel, director of a legal counsel, who is a lawyer, and then I believe that he has his own practice too, and is reply to that 4731? Is that a norm?
Dustlyne, you might be able to jump in with me. I've seen it before, but I wouldn't consider it the norm. So
I've seen it as well. Again, I don't know if it's the norm, if that's what you would expect. So I defer to our other panelists.
I don't think there's anything that precludes the regional center from conferring with an attorney about the 4731 complaint. So if they could do it, they could do it.
Jadopoulos Fraser at 548 said sometimes a lawyer representing a regional center will reply on behalf of the regional center. And they believe it's a tactic of the regional centers using to intimidate.
You can always appeal, because even if they have a lawyer at the regional center, every regional center has a lawyer, and you can always appeal. DDS has the final say. Don't be intimidated. Don't let anybody tell you that something is, that it's a process. And that's the whole point of this, is learning the process. Is 4731 complaint process. First, you present it to the regional center. If they say, hey, no, we're not gonna, okay, well, then I'm gonna use my appeal rights. Nothing negates your appeal rights. And that's the whole thing. So if they're using lawyers to convince you that there's no possible way that your rights were violated, then that lets me know that they're not really being considerate, because I'm just a regular person here saying that this happened to me using this simple process. For somebody like me, you pulling out a big gun, you know, to scare me. But you always have the right to go to DDS. And that's the thing you always have to remember. You can always go to DDS. And what they say is final, not the regional center. If they have to refer you back to the regional center, they will. I've been referred back to the regional center because they'll say, you didn't include this in your complaint at that level. So we're giving the regional center an opportunity to respond to this complaint because it seems like you added something. But it's not scary, it's not intimidating. The thing is it's whether or not you want to use your voice. And that's all of our choice, you know, but it's a process. It was put in there so that folks could speak up for themselves using a process. That we don't have to go in there yelling and screaming and yelling at whoever's at the front desk or whatever. There's a process. And so they use a lawyer, that's fine. You appeal it and go to DDS and include that in your appeal, they use a lawyer so that you can see what they think of the regional center's lawyer.
I want to add to what Mr. Hill just said. I think that's really good advice. Not every attorney gets it right too, right? So you may get an opinion from an attorney, but the attorney may be wrong. Not even, and sometimes even judges don't get it right. So, you know, if you want a second opinion, reach out to others for a second opinion about it. You know, question.
So one of the experiences that I have heard about is that somebody filed a 4731 saying the financial management service, who is a vendor of the regional center, is not paying my employees on time. And they filed it as on everybody's behalf. They denied it because they said that it wasn't part of the IPP. So the recommendation, DDS, so it went all the way up to appeals, and DDS said, well, you know, so kind of the recommendation was that we should all be putting in our IPP that the financial management services will pay our employees on time. And then we have a stronger 4731 case. What do you think about that?
So I'll just chime in here too, because I have the same experience, Christiana, and my mind goes to the, you know, do we need to get that specific to where we're essentially spelling out what the vendor contract should have spelled out? Can we, so this is a question for you guys, can we simply ask in the IPP that the FMS follows with the stipulation set in their vendor contract? I wonder. Because that's a lot easier. We may have, you know, a 10-page IP or 10 pages just lining out all the roles and responsibilities of the FMS. And what happens if you forget to include something that you didn't think about because it hadn't happened until it happened? I don't know. Great question.
DRC also has heard similar complaints about people not being paid on time by their FMS agencies. And you know, one of the things that I just think through in my mind, and you know, y'all can tell me if it's not the right analysis. The spending plan is based on the IPP, and so the money, you know, it's not like who people choose to support them is completely disconnected from the IPP document. It's all linked together. So to say, well, it wasn't technically in the IPP, so there's no violation, that also doesn't kind of sit well. With me anyway, as just a reason to say no violation. One of the things though that I struggle with these types of questions is who's the complaint against? So you have an FMS that's not paying on time. Is that because the regional center has a policy that's somehow getting in the way, you know, they're not paying the FMS for whatever reason, or saying FMS, you can't do this? Or is it the service provider that maybe isn't giving the documentation to get paid? Is it the FMS that has some bad practice, or maybe they're running out of money? I don't know. So one of the things that I might suggest in those situations is, you know, it's okay, it should be okay not to know exactly whose fault it is, because the violation is someone's about to lose the services that were part of their spending plan tethered to the IPP. And how can that be okay? So someone's responsible. It's really hard to figure out who. Regional center investigate, DDS investigate that. So that's a tip with those types of things that I've not seen play out in practice, but this is an issue that's coming up more and more in our system. People aren't getting paid, and who's going to work for free?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Isabel, we have 4 minutes, so we're getting down to our last couple hands here, but go ahead and unmute, Isabel.
Hi, yes, I'm really sorry. I have a few questions and I don't think we're gonna be able to go over them. Let me choose my question. Okay, what is the qualifying age for independent living services, for someone to qualify for independent living services?
18 years.
And does the fact that they are still in a transition program affect their getting the services?
Are they about, are they 18? Are they 18 or over?
Yes. My daughter is homeschooled. I've been homeschooling her ever since she was 13, and she attends such a homeschooling charter school program online. But I mean, she still spends a lot of time in the house, and I'm trying to get her independent living services because she spends a lot of time in the house, and I feel that she benefits from, you know, going out in the community and doing a lot of things out there. Plus, she has so many activities that I can barely handle and be able to support her. You know, I mean, she has so many interests and she wants to do so many things that I feel that if she qualifies for them at 18, I mean, it sounds reasonable for me to see if I can get the services. However, I'm getting conflicting information. Some people say she qualifies, some people say no, she doesn't qualify because she has to finish the transition program. So I'm not really sure if anybody in the meeting might be able to help.
So I can tell you that it depends on your regional center, that we have 21 regional centers, 21 different rules. But if they are going by so if they're saying, well, she can't kind of have adult services until she turns 22 and she exits the school system, which some of the regional centers stick by, then you could ask for something like adaptive living skills instead of independent living skills. Now, not all regional centers have them, but usually adaptive living is for school age. Independent living is for adults who live at home, and supported living services are for adults who live outside of their home. So that it might be possible to have a similar service with a different name. It's always the trick, knowing what to ask for. So that might be an option to try.
So independent living services falls under supported living services?
Now, independent living, school age is adaptive skills. Adults that live at home are independent living skills, and supported living skills are adults that do not live at home. So that's kind of the continuum of similar type services to help with learning independence.
Okay. I just noticed I meant to unblock my camera. So
Is it okay if I add one more thing? And I know we're short on time, but this also presents a good example to distinguish a 4731 complaint in an appeals process. So if there's a regional center that has a policy that says, we will not provide independent living services for anybody who's still eligible to receive services through the special education up to 22, that's a legal violation. People have a right to have an individualized determination about whether those educational services meet their needs. And if the regional center is saying, we're not even going to consider it because this person's still, you know, eligible up to 22, they're not letting the IPP process play out. The I stands for individual. So that's a 4731 complaint. If the regional center is saying, we think that everything that the student's getting meets their needs, and we disagree that they need ILS. So now you have a dispute over like what the person needs. So then you're probably going through the fair hearing appeals process.
I'm still confused as to what would be the best way to go. What should I be?
Reach out. My email address is on the first slide, and I think that DVU can share it. I'll put it in the chat. But I'm happy to feel free to reach out. I'm happy to work through what's the best process to use when you're in a situation like this.
Thank you. That would be really helpful, because also the fact that she's been homeschooled for so long, there's always a lot of fine lines that maybe you might be able to help me. I'll appreciate it greatly.
Thank you all so much. I want to thank all of our speakers who have been here. You have been amazing. I know we had so many questions we didn't get to. We ran out of time. I know this is a big topic. We can, maybe revisit another one. William, Maria, Dustlyne, Tumboura, great job. Thank you all so much. And thank you so much to our interpreters for their hard work. And we will see everybody at the next SDP Connect.